Embarrassment after embarrassment. Poor performance after poor performance. A coach that was fired and a new one that was hired. But so far, it doesn't really feel like things have changed with the US men's national team. And we are roughly 1 year away from the 2026 World Cup. Is this generation not as good as we thought they would be? Is it too early to judge? Were we overhyping them? Or maybe they are fairly rated, but they're just underachievers. Today we're going to be discussing or debating all of that with Alexi Lalas. Hello. If you're new here, I'm Filippo and welcome to Tactical Manager TV. And today we have part 2 of our 2-part interview with Alexi. For part 1 that was already released, we talked about why a good portion of soccer fans in America reject MLS, along with its youth development, culture, and much more. So if you missed that one, go check it out. It was the best of the 2 episodes in my opinion because me and Alexi disagreed a lot. For part 2, we dive into the current US men's national team generation, and we start with the following question. And actually, this question is for you. Is the current US men's national team generation overhyped, or so far, they just have been underachievers? Let me know your thoughts down below, and don't forget to smash or hit that big, beautiful like button, because the like button is flirting with you right now. It just wants you to hit the like button. So do it right now. It helps the channel quite a bit. With that said, let's roll the intro and start the episode. Okay, part 2, Alexi. We never left, but a lot of the people probably left and came back. Some didn't come back. Thank you for sticking for this long, because the first episode was long.
I don't know. Is it long in today's world and today's technology and platform world? I mean, we just kind of go in the age of the Joe Rogans and stuff like that. This is kind of good. And I think people will hang. I mean, I like to think that it's interesting, and maybe that's egotistical of me, but I enjoyed what you had to say, and we agreed and we had disagreed, and this is how we do it.
I think it's interesting that you mentioned even like Joe Rogan has those 3-hour podcasts, and I think it's the biggest podcast in the world, I believe. But nowadays you see a lot of the kids, they can't really watch a video for more than like 30 seconds, and then they have to watch a reel. Then we go on to do these long podcasts, and to my surprise on YouTube, at least, I'll speak on behalf of YouTube, longer videos tend to even do better. People do stick around. They like to listen. They like to watch the longer videos.
Maybe the pendulum is swinging with your generation, and it's not always about the soundbite and the 15 seconds attention span out there. Maybe, who knows? Maybe you'll even start reading books, real books.
I'm not going back to that. No, podcasts are better. Also, because we drive too much these days, so podcasts are just more convenient.
I hear you. Listen, I am in the podcast world too with my State of the Union, and we all know that routine is very, very important, and people kind of form their week around their podcast listening, whether, like you said, they're in their car or going to work and out jogging or doing whatever they do, and God forbid it doesn't show up there in that feed, and your whole world is thrown out of whack because that podcast that you normally listen to at this time is not there.
And also sometimes you listen to a podcast and it kind of just makes you panic or see the world in a different way too.
Yep.
Like there's a lot of crazy stuff going on. But anyhow, let's talk about the current US men's national team generation, because I'm even going to, I think, quote you, because I think you've said this before. We were sold a golden generation. You said this before. And right now it doesn't feel like one, right? I mean, we may agree that, hey, on paper, it still is the most talented generation, probably. But definitely, it doesn't feel this way right now. So I'm going to open this up with a very spicy, hot question for you. And understand that this generation still has a lot to go through. They still have a World Cup at home. A lot of these players will be in 2030 as well. So 2 World Cups possibly. Some of them might be even in 2034. Could be even 3. So there is still a lot to go on. And most of the time, these national team generations are judged upon what they do in the World Cup outside of everything else. Even if they stink the bed on everything, if you go far in the World Cup, that's all that people will care about. But they haven't done that yet, and it's been kind of underwhelming. Is this generation so far overhyped? And I guess that would be partially on myself, the fan base. We overhype them, right? It's not really the players. It's we overhype them, media, everyone. Or are they underachievers so far?
Yeah, I think they're underachievers. I
Okay.
think the hype is warranted and fair. And to your point, oftentimes it's relative to where they're playing, the leagues that they're playing in, and then obviously the teams that they're playing in. And it's again perception versus reality, because then when you look at some of these teams, they are lesser versions of the teams that we grew up in, knowing, whether it's a Juventus or AC Milan. And it's not to take anything away from guys that are playing there. It's still an accomplishment and a feat, and something that we should be celebrated. But I do think that they have failed to live up to some of the hype, even though the hype is fair. And we may be the architects of our own demise, in that we were so adamant about having players go to Europe, and you got to go to Europe. And when they have done that, many of them have been successful. And like I said, they're playing at some really, really big clubs. They're getting incredible fame. They're making a lot of money. And I worry that the connection that they have to the national team, and therefore representing what I feel is the greatest country in the world, starts to dissipate a little bit. And that is problematic, because that will manifest. If you just look at it as a job, if you just look at it as punching in for your national team, we're done. I like to think that when a Christian Pulisic gets on the plane, or a Tyler Adams gets on the plane, it's the best moment, because they know they're coming back to play for a country that they love, for a team that they love. And I question that now when it comes to this team, as to what they feel when they are representing this nation. And again, maybe it's because of everything that they have been given. And I know that sounds like a grumpy old man type of thing to say, but if what we're seeing right now is a manifestation of that, then that's a problem. And I don't know how you get that back. How do you keep them down on the farm after they've seen Paris? Okay, they have been to these great moments, and I don't begrudge them. I'm so happy. It actually means that we've progressed, and these opportunities that didn't exist in the past are being given to them. But I don't think it's too much to ask to have both things. You can have your incredible club existence and what you're doing, and make the money and have the fame and play in these incredible games with these incredible players and these incredible clubs, and bring all of that knowledge and that experience back to make the national team better. And that's where the disconnect is right now.
Yeah, I agree also that I still think they're underachievers. And if they don't achieve anything good in the next, let's say, 2 World Cups, that's how I'm gonna mainly see them. I think the hype is fair. I don't think anyone's going out there and saying this generation has to win a World Cup. That's not what we're thinking. Honestly, even a semifinals, I don't think it's a fair pressure to put on them. I would love to see that, and I think it is possible. I just don't think it's fair to say that's the bare minimum. But anyhow, one thing I was gonna try to get your thoughts on this. Could it be that they look like they don't care, or they look like they're not putting in all that effort because with their clubs, even though they play for great clubs, these are not players that are very often asked to take the initiative in that club. They're mostly not the main guys. Then when they come into the national team, all of a sudden it's like McKennie is a starter, but a role player with Juventus. Then with the national team's like, McKennie, you got to make things happen now. Get the ball, take. And it's like, wait a second, that's not what I do there. There, I take the ball, I find someone, I crash the box, they send in, I score goals, but I'm not the one making things happen. And honestly, even Christian Pulisic for Milan, when you see, he does make things happen, but he's not the guy. You see Theo Hernandez and Rafael Leão really being the guys like, let's make it happen. Pulisic's kind of there, and then you give him one moment or two, boom, he strikes. But he's not the one really calling the game. Like, a great example, like Kobe Bryant would do in the last 2 minutes, right? He was like, give me the ball. I'm going to win this game. That's not Pulisic for Milan. But when you come to the national team, you kind of need Pulisic to be the Kobe Bryant of the national. It's like, give me the ball. And he tries sometimes to play this hero ball, and clearly it doesn't really work. And that applies to like all of our players. They're all good players in good teams, but they're not the guy. Where it comes to the national team, they all have to take the initiative, and that's not really who they are.
Yeah. I think I understand what you're saying, but I think we're letting them off the hook and giving them an out because of that. And again, this isn't me, ignoring the reality, because some of what you said is absolutely true. But this is let's be honest, it's the case when it comes to a lot of national teams and a lot of players. The circumstances and the role inherent to going to a national team are often very, very different. And your ability to adjust to that is actually what makes you valuable to a national team. There are some very, very good players that haven't been able to make that adjustment and therefore are not of value to the national team, as good as they may be. A national team is not about the best players. It's about the best collection of players. And so suck it up, Buttercup. You got to figure it out. Now, if in this case it's Pochettino, who, by the way, is being paid $6 million a year in order to figure out, if Pochettino is putting the onus on players and giving them responsibilities that they haven't had in the past, that's one thing. Because you can, change the role of a player, but you can't change the player completely. If you are giving a role, in this case, we're using a Weston McKennie, for example, and telling him to do things that you want him to do, and you believe he can do it, that's okay. But if he can't do it, that is a problem. And you got to be able to suss that out really, really quickly. So that's a long way of saying, yes, I agree that these players at times are being asked to play different roles and to do different things than they have with their club team. But that doesn't mean that they can't do it or that they don't have to do it, and that it's not Pochettino's job to figure out if they can do it, if he wants them to do it with the national team. But there is still, even with all of that said, there is still plenty of talent and enough talent to be playing better than what they are doing right now. Much better.
Do you think Pochettino might be a bit stubborn?
Yeah, I
think so. I'm just gonna, so I don't put you on the spot. I think so, and I'll explain why in a second. But
in a bad way, because there's a negative connotation to that. I think
in a bad way. I think in a bad way.
Yeah, he's not able to
adjust.
I mean, let's be honest. First off, this is his first international experience, so that in and of itself for any coach is an adjustment, right? You don't have the day in and day out, so you have to really distill it down to its simplest form when you are imparting the information to your players, and you can't get into the weeds. I think he understands that, and if he doesn't, then we have even bigger problems. His stubbornness on the surface, that could be problematic. And I hope that he is able to adjust in terms of the way that he thinks about the team and the way that he thinks about the game. I mean, for example, if he thinks that, well, I did this when I was at Spurs or wherever, and so I'm going to just try to replicate that. And then we get down the line and then he figures out, oh my God, I can't, because it's a completely different group and a completely different type of circumstances here. That's a problem. But then that's on the federation, because if you're paying a guy $6 million a year and he's not able to adjust, that's on you. I do think that there is an element of stubbornness that can work, but you really have to be able to hone in on it and use it correctly in what you are doing. For example, if that stubbornness is, I recognize, and I'm talking as Pochettino, that you don't have to be the greatest soccer player in the world, but you do have to be ruthless. I know you watch a lot of South American soccer, right? One of the things that I love about the South American mentality is how ruthless it is. I mean, we attach all of this magic, and whether it's jogo bonito with all that kind of stuff, and to Brazil, or just the incredible
You've
talent.
been watching the Libertadores, haven't you? It's a war.
I love that about it. I mean, when we had the Copa America over the last couple of times that we've had it, to see that on our shores and to see these incredible players, skill-wise, huge stars, paid a lot of money, have that ruthlessness also as part of their characteristic and their personality, that's good. And so if he brings that, and I'm attaching stubbornness to it, maybe it's not a fair word, but that stubbornness in the ruthlessness of, you don't have to be the best player in the world, but you got to be able to believe that this guy will cut you in order to win. If he can establish some of that, and maybe that comes from that stubbornness, that Argentinian stubbornness, that's a good thing. And we don't have enough of that.
I think when I mean stubbornness, for example, and I think you might even agree with me with this one, the way I see it is this. One of the biggest things I criticized Berhalter for was the stubbornness that he's like, we have to play a certain way. We have to disorganize the opponent. And I was like, it's not working, dude. Like we're not doing it. It's not working. So change. Like, okay, we're going to go back to, maybe playing a mid to low block, try to hit the opponent in transition, because it's not working. But Berhalter was married to that system and he died by it eventually. And the overall point is like the way I see soccer is this: it's a tough sport to score, so it's much easier to defend than it is to attack. Right? It's tougher. It's much easier if you're playing. If you're a worse team, you can maybe hold a 0-0 draw.
Sure.
Now, if you're a better team, you might score one goal on that far worse team. Right? So it is easier to play that way. And Alexi, what moment of the game is the team the most disorganized on defense?
After you've scored a goal?
No, in possession.
Oh, in
When you're
possession.
in
Okay.
possession, it's when you're the most exposed. So if you can have quick transitions, that might be the best way for the United States rather than trying to disorganize the opponent at the ball. The problem with Pochettino's approach is we talked about Berhalter not adapting. Like the first cycle, I had issues with the player selections and him never changing the style of play. The second cycle, I honestly had no issues with the player selections for the most part. I thought he was calling up the players that should be called in terms of talent, of course. But he kept playing the same way. It wasn't working. And ultimately it happened with the Copa America and he was gone. But Pochettino so far seems to have this one way of playing. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because it was the first time that he flopped, right? So maybe in the Gold Cup, we'll see a different team. Right. He's like, okay, now I see that it doesn't work with these players. I'll change. But my concern is that. And the reason I also say about stubbornness, there were comments about him on Dual Nationals a few months ago where he's like, we're not going to go, essentially saying we're not going to go recruit. You want to play, you play, which I agree to a certain extent that it's like you want players that want to play. If you're not interested, then go. I don't want you at the national team. But the United States is very different from Argentina. It's a very unique country. Like, for example, Ricardo Pepi, he might have actually been completely divided between the U.S. and Mexico. He might want to play for the U.S. and Mexico. So maybe it does require some level of recruiting. He's like, hey, come play for us. Show him what he can get. Just as one example. And then we talked about a few dual nationals that could right now fix a few of our issues. And based on reports, again, I'm not in U.S. soccer. Maybe they're talking to them, and what I'm saying is a load of crap. But based on multiple reports, they are aware, but they haven't really done much about like a Nathaniel Brown, for example, a very young, promising left back that could even compete with A-Rob or can play as a winger. That would be a major issue that we would fix if this player wants to play for us. A Henri Chase. And so that's my overall point. His comments, maybe they are recruiting. Okay. I don't have any inside information of that. But the comments were more like, this is how we do it in Argentina. And this is what I'm going to do here. It's like, yeah, this is a different country. And if you don't adapt, it's not going to work. I'm not saying to go on your knees and beg for a dual national to play, but it does require some level of recruiting with the U.S. men's national team for a few players.
Okay, a couple of things. You would, when you're assessing Greg Berhalter, and by the way, this should apply also to Jurgen Klinsmann, that they recognize the value of recruitment, right?
Yes, they both did, yeah.
Absolutely. But in our previous conversations here, you have said it's not working what we're doing. So why would you be adverse to somebody coming in and doing something differently? And I know I'm just kind of pushing back here on your.
I can explain that, but yeah,
of Pochettino. But if we want to do something bigger and something better, and I'm not suggesting you throw the baby out with the bathwater by any stretch of the imagination. I agree with you in that the romantic notion of playing is fine when you are some of the elite teams in the world. But for the United States right now, being pragmatic in our approach, I think, is the way to the promised land. If the U.S. men's team were to go out and win the World Cup in 2026, a la Greece when they won the Euros, right? Complete parking the bus type of situation, bend but don't break, and then steal a goal on a set piece type of situation. The U.S. public, whether it's the dyed-in-the-wool soccer fans out there or just people just coming into the tent for the first time, they are not going to give a crap how we actually win. All they care about is winning. Now, there are romantics out there that would say, no, but that's not how I want the game to be played. That's fine, and I can respect that. As a matter of fact,
that's like 3 people in this country.
No, but I will say, if you are going to talk the talk, you have to walk the walk. And I actually have respect for people, even though it might lead to their downfall in terms of them getting fired. If a coach is going to say it, don't have it be lip service. I appreciate and respect if you are going to die on that hill if you are going to be romantic about it, because there are too many of them that talk and say, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do it, and then they don't really do that. And so you basically lied to me. But if you are going to say this is how we're going to play, then you better be willing to stand on it, even when things don't go well. It doesn't mean you can't adjust. I know what you're going to say there. You have to be able to adjust here. But there is an element out there that speaks in romantic ways, and then when it really gets down to it, they get very, very pragmatic very fast. Because as you said, that's kind of the way that you ultimately, and then maybe it's unique to soccer. I actually think it is unique to soccer, where a much lesser type of team can find a way to win in the game. You know, when you're talking about basketball, if you have the ball most of the time, football, if you have the ball most of the time, most of the sports out there, if you have the ball most of the time, you are going to ultimately, more often than not, much more often than not, win. Soccer's not necessarily like that, as we know.
So, a couple things to talk about. You were referring also to the other episode when I said we have to rely less on USMNT or players developed abroad. I think that was one thing you mentioned. Yes, but we have to get it done in the short run too. What I meant on the previous one is that I wanted MLS to develop so many right now at this point, at this stage, that let's say we have 3 or 4 left backs that were like, hey, Nathaniel Brown is good, but just say, do you want to come here? No? Okay, we got 3 other options. We don't really. That's one issue.
Beggars can't be choosers right now.
Yeah, at the moment. And again, I can't overemphasize how important, you know that because you played in 94, how important that was for soccer in America. And I can't overemphasize how important the World Cup next year is. And if we have to do everything we can to get the best result possible, whatever that is.
So you think that Pochettino is going to leave some on the table, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, I'm nobody to say Pochettino is right or wrong about this, but in my opinion, I think there is a disconnect from him, and it goes back maybe to the federation to guide him. It's like Pochettino, I get your idea, like for example, dual nationals, but this ain't Argentina. It's a little bit different. I know this because Brazil does this all the time. They completely ignore dual nationals. They completely ignore them. Look at the players Brazil has lost. Pepe, the center back from Real Madrid for Portugal, he's Brazilian, developed in Brazil and everything. They didn't even care. Diego Costa, the center forward that were scoring 20, 30 goals in the Premier League, they didn't care. They lost him. Thiago Motta, the coach from Juventus that played for the Italian, they didn't care. They don't recruit. And even for Brazil, in my opinion, it's a bit of a mistake because these are Brazilian players, right? They're eligible for your team. At least like give the guy a call, right? If they were like, you saw how good these players turned out to be. They would Brazil could have had Diego Costa in the 2014 World Cup instead of Fred up top. That could have been a difference maker.
Yeah.
But anyhow, I think someone has to talk to Pochettino and say, look, you have your ideas, and obviously we hired you due to that, and it has worked. But understand that you can't be stubborn and just try the same thing. You have to have some flexibility to adapt to the environment that you're in. And US soccer is a lot different than Latin America, in CONMEBOL specifically, at least. It's very different. And a lot of your ideas here will work, and we want to go with it. But some unique things that we have, and so we talked about even about MLS, you have to unfortunately be willing to adapt because we need to get the results. Because I think also Pochettino is here for the short ride, not for the long run. I think he's here to go to the World Cup and get the job done there, and then he'll go back to Europe. And even for him, having a good World Cup will probably open a lot of doors if he gets a good World Cup, because he was kind of on a like, we like it or not, he was a bit on a decline in Europe. Like, he had great work with Southampton, great work with Tottenham. Then PSG was underwhelming, to say the least. And Chelsea was, I guess, better than what some coaches were doing there, but it wasn't like he was spectacular with Chelsea. So it wasn't the Pochettino that got a Tottenham to the Champions League final. Doing well in the World Cup can open up more doors in Europe for him, despite his great resume. And I'm a little concerned that he might just be stubborn. We're not going to change the coach anymore. We're going with him to 2026.
Yeah.
I am still hopeful because I know this dude wants to get a good result. There's no way he's willing to go to the World Cup and flop. It'll be an embarrassment for him. And he might even want the Argentina job at some point. So doing well at the US can open that door, right? I just hope he's flexible and we don't run into similar issues that we had with like Berhalter, where he's like, I will stick to this system and I will live or die by it. And if he goes by the system, I think it's more likely that he dies by it than he lives by it. I just don't think our players are suited to play this progressive soccer that
Yeah.
we want. And I think I've heard this from you. I've heard it from myself. I heard this from Pete from 11 Yanks. I think Tim Howard said it's like tab. Everyone's saying it. So it can't be that everyone is wrong and just like the coach is the only one that's right. Everyone's seen this at this point.
Yeah, but I mean, I think not to give Pochettino or coaches in general grace, we are in a moment where that romantic notion of playing, and especially playing out of the back,
Pep Guardiola,
is equated with good soccer, and anything else is looked at as rudimentary and raw and regressive. And so it's a hard time, I think, to be a coach coming up, because from a very young age now, coaches are told this is how the game should be played. And what they aren't told is that while it might look nice when it's done, usually the examples that are being given are at the absolute highest level, with the elite of the elite players, and the elite teams also playing against teams that are of much lesser quality. And so therefore it's a bastardized look at the game at the game. And so you got to be strong enough to say, no, that's not how we are going to play. And that there is beauty even in this raw approach out there. It's not always easy. Pochettino certainly has enough clout to be able to do that. And I think we both kind of hope that that's what he does. You might not be as convinced that he is going to do that going forward, but I think we both agree that that is the pathway to success. And also, while I agree it's going to be completely short term, he can fundamentally change the perception of him as a coach globally if he has success in the summer of 2026. I mean, hell, if he does really, really good things, they will build statues of him going forward. And he will, whether it's Argentina or anybody else out there, I think he will have the pick of the litter when it comes to prime jobs out there, whether it's internationally or from a club perspective. But we're a long way off from that. And there are concerns, and I share a lot of your concerns. If after all of this, and after all the money we've spent and all the hoopla and changing Greg and bringing in Pochettino, we just fall flat on our face. And it should be noted that going to a World Cup's not an accomplishment. Getting out of the group is not an accomplishment. Hell, we're a handball away possibly of going to a semifinal back in 2002. So doing something that we haven't seen before, and that can manifest in a bunch of different ways. It's not just about winning and losing. It might even be just, remember when Jurgen Klinsmann coached the German team in the World Cup, right? They didn't ultimately win the World Cup.
Semis. Yeah.
But what he did to bring that country together, and the pride that he, through this team, was able to coalesce, that was why he was, knighted or whatever they made him. That's another reason why he is a legendary German, because of that summer and what he did. And I think Pochettino has the opportunity to do something like that in terms of bringing us all together and celebrating the country, by the way, on the 250th birthday of our country in that summer, and doing it through soccer.
And I also think that if he's flexible and he changes the style of play of this team, you might just naturally bring that grit back. I think anyone that's played sports, when you're the underdog, you have that extra fight on you because they're telling you, it's like, you're not the best team here. You are meant to lose this game. And then when you have that competitive nature, which all these players have, they're professional athletes. You can't become a professional athlete without being competitive. It's just impossible. It is impossible. You need to have that. The moment he goes and just tells the team, listen, this is how we're going to play now. You know why? Because we're not the most talented team. We're going to play this way. We might not out talent them, but we're going to outfight them, out coach, out tactic them, whatever you want to call it. That might immediately change how this team behaves on the field. I'm just saying, I don't know these players on a personal level. I think as a human, we can think of it this way, and I think it could happen. And even to your point, like the 2002 team, 94 team, you guys were all told that you were meant to lose.
Yep.
You're supposed to lose. So all of a sudden, when you have that on your mess, like, I don't want to lose. These are 11 humans playing 11 humans. Why am I meant to lose to them? And it changes the way you play. And you're going to win the 50-50 duels. And you're going to be focused and wired the full 90 minutes. It's a completely different team all of a sudden. I think it could have an impact on the mentality of this team if he simply changes like the narratives. Like, no, we're not going to disorganize the opponent the ball. We're going to defend for our lives, and we're going to strike them when they're vulnerable, which is in transition. And all of a sudden that changes. And I think that's why the U.S. used to punch above their weight. And then now this episode, for example, we open it by saying we're underachievers. We were never underachievers. Why are we underachievers now? Right? We weren't like that. Why is it that when we got the best generation that we had, we all of a sudden become underachievers? Why?
Well, it's probably there's an element of the hardest and the last step to take for any team is to go from being the underdog, which we have played that role very, very well over the years, like you said. And it is easier to be the underdog, oftentimes, and to be the favorite and to be elite. And we might have to do a combination of both, to be quite honest with you. Not we might, we are going to. So when the groups come out for the 26th World Cup, I can tell you right now, I'm going to expect this U.S. team to win the group. All right, expanded group, 48 teams, regardless of who it ends up being, to win the group. That wasn't the case when we went to previous World Cups. But where we are right now, and I do think it's fair, we should expect this. So there will be an element of being the favorite, which as I just said, is often the most difficult and the final frontier, if you will, to cross for teams. And then there will be elements through the tournament, if they progress, hopefully, and knocking on wood, where they become that underdog and they can revert to that. It doesn't mean, though, that a lot of the characteristics and some of the things we're talking about and how they play necessarily has to change that much.
And then last but not least here, are you still hopeful that, so your generation, 94, was able to punch above their weight. I think it's fair to say that 2002 was able also to punch above their weight. Now, we've had bad World Cups like 98, 06. 2010, I would say it's fair to say they slightly punched above their weight. 2014, they most certainly punched above their weight, placed in a group with the champions, Germany,
Yep.
Portugal with prime Ronaldo, and a Ghana team that a World Cup ago, they were a handball away from the semifinals.
Yep.
From Luis Suarez, like a penalty kick away. That was a group that the U.S. was meant to go out, and they didn't. They played a Belgium golden generation, and regardless of Tim Howard putting one of the greatest goalkeeper performances of all time, they took that team to extra time. Like it doesn't matter, like the context, that's what that team accomplished. For this team specifically, because I already asked you the bare minimum, and you told me that. What would be considered, obviously in a realistic way, not saying win the World Cup, but what would be considered punching above their weight next year?
So you get out of your group. Obviously, there's a whole nother round here in the round of 32. And I don't care. I mean, unless it ends up being one of the elites of the elite, and there's just the way that it works. But if you finish first in your group, it's not going to be like that. So it's
or they're struggling, or they'll be struggling.
Right. Yeah. It's a winnable game. You're getting out of your group first in that round of 32. So you go through that. And I'm not saying it's just, with a smoke and a coffee, it's no problem or anything like that. As you get through a tournament, it gets harder and harder and harder. But they should have the ability to get through that. When it comes to the round of 16, now this is where you're starting to maybe punch above your weight in, even with its, we saw the Dutch in the previous World Cup. Now you're starting to think, okay, they can match us. They don't look at us necessarily as a team that's better than them. But this is where Pochettino is going to really earn his money in doing things that we haven't seen before. And, even when we lost to the Dutch in the previous World Cup, there wasn't this, oh, my goodness, I can't believe we lost to the Dutch. It was like, yeah, I wish we had won, and I expected more, but it's still the Dutch. I would expect us to do something that people say, wow, that was something special. And now you're into rarefied air after that. So, yeah, I would expect at the very least they get to the round of 16, and that's where that big moment and that legendary type of win against a team that at least most of the world thinks are not light years ahead of us, but a little bit better than us.
Yeah, I think I mostly agree that would be punching above their weight. Essentially, make it to the quarterfinals, but knock out a legendary nation, which would be a Dutch. It can be an Argentina, Brazil, France, England, Spain, whatever. One of these nations that have been there and done it before.
Yeah.
Knock
and
them
that
out.
The world would kind of consider, hey, that was an upset. That was amazing.
Yeah. And essentially, if you do that and you get to the quarterfinals, all of a sudden there's a sense of belief that you can make the semi.
Yeah, now the end's in sight and things can happen, and and obviously it gets harder and stuff like that. But and then there's the bigger thing that is harder to qualify, except you can feel it. If we do come together, and if you can feel something changing within that 6-week span of what is happening with soccer on the ground and people getting into it, and it's being directed through that team and what they are doing, that's now you're cooking. Now you're cooking. And
You know what
that's
I think you just described? You described the 2002 World Cup if they had given that handball and penalty kick for the US.
Yeah, or if it had been in a time zone where everybody was actually
That's
up and watching. But yeah, exactly. That's what you're in kind of beautiful dreamland, and that can certainly happen. You're looking for a little bit of magic and a little soccer god smiling upon you, so you can't count on that. But a home World Cup, everybody there, all of that opportunity, and you can look at it as pressure. But I look at it even back in 1994. Yeah, there was pressure on us to do well for the future of the game, but I looked at it as opportunity, and finally people were going to pay attention for this month, and we could change the way that people look at soccer going forward. And I think that same thing can happen in 2026, albeit in a very different climate and landscape, because the world is coming back to just a completely changed American soccer landscape. Whether it's you or anybody else out there, it's just very, very different in a good way.
Well, it's actually interesting that this episode comes to an end here. It feels like when we disagree the most is when we involve MLS. The U.S. men's national team right there. Most of it wasn't a disagreement. When we put MLS, it's probably the most controversial topic with U.S. soccer these days. It's not that USMNT fans are divided. There's a division among the league of people that follow it,
Sure.
don't follow it. I think that's where it is. Generally, when we only focus on the national team, it looks like most people agree. It's just when we involve Major League Soccer. But Alexi, thank you very much for taking the time here. Hope to have you back in the future, maybe for the World Cup, maybe.
Hey, listen, as I had said when we did, our first show, there's a reason why I wanted to come on and why I enjoy talking to you, and why, this new media type of landscape is so important. I'm from way back in the day when, we started out with like fanzines when it came to soccer, and then it went to big soccer boards, and then obviously with the advent of the internet and all the websites and blogs, and obviously into the the podcast platforms and stuff like that. The more people talking about soccer, the better. And the more smart people talking about soccer, the better. And you are certainly one of those. And so congratulations on all of your success. Thank you for having me on. Again, we can agree or disagree on when it comes to what's happening, but we're all kind of heading in the right direction, and we all want soccer to be bigger in the United States, and you are a part of why it's happening.
I'm still going to pick on you on X.
That's
okay?
All right. Okay. Everybody else does.
Yeah. Well, they pick on me too, just for different reasons. But
it comes with the territory. You're going to be just fine.
Thank you very much for watching, everyone. Don't forget to drop a like in this video and let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And if you missed out, we did have part 1 of this episode, which was mainly focused on Major League Soccer. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day. Bye-bye.